What if thought leaders from around the university came together to discuss state-of-the-art remedies to 21st century challenges? From the Center for Online and Continuing Education, this is Faculty Lounge Live.
Good afternoon, my name is Chang. I'm Assistant Director here at the Center for Online and Continuing Education. And with me today, I have the pleasure of speaking to Vini Araujo, our multimedia producer. And today we're going to go over some of the AR workflows that we used in creating course content here at the Center for Online and Continuing Education. So Vini, obviously the first thing we're always going to start with is scripting, right? So how do you get the ideas? How does somebody approach you with an idea? And then how do you use AI to kind of work this into a script or a storyboard?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here to share with everyone a little bit of our workflow here at the media team for the Center for Online and Continuing Education. And typically the workflow, it depends. I think there's a lot of variables that go in place, but typically when we are working with a faculty, professor, they give us kind of like a rough outline as far as how they want a script to go. So my first step is to, gather as much information as possible, understanding the course, right? Because they're the experts, not us. I would love to be an expert in some of these fields, but it's so difficult. So they give us all their ideas, they give us all the information we need, and some of them even give us like a rough draft, right? And that's kind of like the best way for us to start our process. Once you give our team a rough draft, that way we can kind of see, okay, this is the plan. This is sort of like the overview as far as what you want to do. So for today, I wanted to kind of give everyone like a walkthrough as far as like how we go from beginning to end with a lot of these AI tools that we could, just enhance your workflow and enhance your course at the end of the day. So the first thing we have here is an online course for it's a intro to diversity in education. This was with Dr. Melanie Acosta, and we've been working, for a bit now. And she sent me this course introduction, it's a very rough draft. And at first, I really enjoyed it because, just the topic in itself, it's a very interesting topic, and it delves into diversity from history and culture, and I enjoy history and culture topics. So right off the bat, I knew that a lot of the footage or the assets, the supplemental footage that I wanted to use, were going to have to be curated or sourced to add into that. But she doesn't really specifically mention anything there, except for a couple things like the use of ethnography and ethnographic research. What else? There was talking about our distance and contemporary ancestors, which give us a generic idea of what the course is about, but still not too detailed. So what I did was I grabbed her script, threw it into ChatGPT, and I said, rewrite this to be a little bit more engaging, a little bit more exciting. I would sometimes, based on the conversation we have, if I can tell that the course is a little bit serious, the topic, I'll say, hey, reference this video, I want to reference this video or this movie or this documentary or this style of this specific video that I'll link to it. But most of the times I reference Masterclass, the content that they produce, whether it's pretty, it's to me, it's one of the best. And, if I could, emulate just a sample of that and throw it onto one of our courses, that's just the least that I could do. So that's essentially what we did, by simply just copy and pasting, what we have here, going into ChatGPT and saying for it to rewrite. This is kind of what I got out of it. I also asked for it to include visuals, that way I can really see it in a better, view as opposed to just reading it, out loud. So before she starts, saying welcome explorers, you have the opening scene of aerial shots of a cityscape, transitioning to the countryside, ancient temples, marketplace, and then it goes to Melanie, Acosta, Dr. Melanie Acosta. And really the whole goal of this video was kind of like a journey through all these like diversity in education and in cultures. We didn't really get to do what was set out from the beginning, which would be like her sitting, let's say on a, literally like on a mountaintop. We were gonna have her sitting on a green screen like chair so that I can place her there. Another one was like sitting by like a lake, like in a remote village. However, we still were able to capture that with the assets that were used. But when I read this now, and obviously through her approval, I say, hey, look, check this out. This is still a rough sketch or a rough draft. Let's still fine tune it, because at the end of the day, as many of you know, AI still isn't like perfect. It hallucinates, it has its imperfections. So, through, her approval and my revision, I said, hey, look, I think this is the best, thing that we could use for your course. And it kind of, worked for its favor, because like we really got a decent intro for this course, where she goes in and tells us what is the plan, and it's her going in through all these journeys of history and culture. Throughout that intro, you see a ton of different, different like content and location, which we'll show in a couple of minutes here. And I think the exciting part was the use of AI. I think for me, there were certain moments where we don't physically have footage of stuff that hasn't happened, thousands and hundreds of years ago, or we don't have access to something that hasn't been done yet. So we can generate that video and use it as supplemental footage. So, I did want to show a little bit of it and then kind of talk about how I even got to that. So we won't play the full video, but we'll play kind of like just certain parts of it to show you what we mean. But right here, right in the beginning, where we have all the different locations that we talked about, the city, the farm, sort of like landscape, a temple, marketplace, all of that before starting. Very simple. Sourcing these assets weren't that hard, right? But as we go into her introduction and she talks about the course, she mentions we need to go back in time to look at history and culture to sort of assess where we're going on today. And I thought in that moment, okay, this is a perfect opportunity for me to use AI. And this is an example of one of the frames that I have. I don't know if you can capture or you can see it clearly, but I'll play it a couple seconds. So starting now, at the top of the screen, you see this sort of like this shot where it's like the camera's tracking forward, and you see a gentleman writing on an old parchment paper and ink and pen. And at this moment, I threw on a bunch of elements, not only photos, some of them are actual real photos, others were AI generated, but I wanted to play a clip that would show even better what she's referring to. So as you see here, this was all generated through the use of Sora, which will also later go in and talk about like some of the tools that you could use, and some of the tools that we use, obviously. But this is really, exciting to see. Like I could have easily just shown a photo, right? But I was able to add in all these elements and capture it in even more like higher elements. So I know I'm kind of going ahead here talking about the tools, but yeah, in the beginning, it all starts with a conversation with the professor. And through that conversation, we're able to then, refine their script so that when they come in here, they have a really, fleshed out script, and we can then use that as what we're going to use to, to edit their videos.
And some of these assets could be provided to you, or you go out and look at them for stock libraries or stock footage? For
sure. It's always good to ask, if there's something they want to provide, because if in fact you want historically accurate, or doesn't have to be historical, if there's specific things, let's say it's a math course and you want to show like fractals and geometry, and it's like, oh, I want this, this type of design, this set. You send that over and we can find something that either looks similar to that or even enhance what you've provided. But typically, instead of us sourcing, it's easier if they can provide that, and gives us a step forward. in like a step ahead as far as editing and that process.
Yeah, this is actually pretty cool. You got a camera movement. It's not just a static shot.
Exactly. It already is doing like a 3D sort of like parallax of like a table. It's not a real table. I just got an image off, off the internet of wood panels, all these parchment papers as image, and had just this 3D effect to look like the camera is turning. But in reality, these are all 2D assets. These are 2D. That's kind of like the ideation part. It's usually, the first step to anything. We can't go and edit or start content creation. We can't, enhance your footage. You can't finalize it without that first step, which is the whole planning and creating these ideas from scratch.
All right. So then the next step is, creating the content to supplement what you've already have representing the video. So what else do you do when you need that shot? For example, that would have been a very difficult shot to find.
For sure.
So you're creating a few other ones that she references in her script.
Yes. It's all, it takes time. I think as as I progress in my journey as a media, and a creative person, I think over time what works and what doesn't, and a lot of times it's easy to stick to the simple things, and it's sourcing those stock footage, right? So a lot of the stuff that you see in the beginning, like all this is assets from, whether it's Artlist, Film Pack, Story Blocks, Adobe Stock, Envato Elements. You just search by keyframes. I need, a farm or like a area shot of a city, and it gives you all these options, and then you choose what you think feels best. So that's the easy step, is like, you're not generating anything, you're sourcing it, you're going through these platforms to find stuff. But at the end of the day, there might be a roadblock where something specific that you want doesn't necessarily look like the stock footage, doesn't look the way you want it to be, or it doesn't exist, right? Especially like historical assets. Mm-hmm. So the first step is, just sourcing that. But there's so many, tools out there. We can spend hours talking about what exists. We have Adobe Firefly, which is pretty neat. I don't personally use it as much as I use Sora, which is OpenAI's image and text to video. But Adobe Firefly is an example of what you could use, text to video, image to video. Another one is DALL-E. DALL-E is pretty good as well. Another one that I'm not so familiar with, but I've heard good things of. But the ones that I do use the most are, like I said, OpenAI Sora's. That's probably one of the leading tools for image or text to video, and also Google VO2. That's another option. But today we're just going to focus on Sora and maybe talk quickly about Runway. But I did want to show my process of how I was able to generate that and other ones. As you see here, she mentions we need to go back into historical do research on historical ancestors and look at our contemporary ones. As I thought about that shot, I was like, okay, like, what am I going to use? And again, at first I had stock footage over that part, but I still didn't feel like it fit the tone and the look. So what I did instead was, this is the first one that we talked about, but right after here, she mentions that, and there's these two clips that I have back to back that are pretty neat. This first one, which are just like, I wanted like an indigenous tribe. That's something that she mentioned. You have to go back to, our ancestors, and who best as the people that were here first in this country. And these are like just elders, I would assume, sitting by a campfire, talking. And that's like what I had envisioned in my mind. I had other stock footage related to that, but it didn't still fit the look. So again, through the use of ChatGPT, where I can add or create a prompt, I would then use the guidelines that Sora offers and then throw it into Sora, and I would get an output, which was this. And then right after, she talks about some contemporary ancestors. So I thought it would be nice, since it's like a course on diversity and education. I wanted to show Frederick Douglass. I had an image of him that, again, I use that same parallax, like Ken Burns effect where there's movement, but I still didn't like feel like authentic and true and like to what she was talking about. So this one took a little bit of time of fine tuning to create this shot, but I was able to get something somewhat realistic to what I think, would be Frederick Douglass walking in the library. And then the rest of these are all stock footage to, again, continue on the script that she's talking about. So, a little bit of how that process works. I did want to kind of show everyone what that is. And the first thing here is just like, I wanted to just, before I go in and show what I've done, Basora, these are some generated videos that users have done in this platform. And you can see how insane, like the type of things that you see here. Some are like extremely abstract and like kind of ridiculous and sort of somewhat like a joke, but it's still interesting to see how far you're able to create something, from something as silly as a cat looking dragon to this like hyper realistic shot of a woman standing in the field. That's some of the strengths that Sora has, that it's really like, I wouldn't say limitless, but they have a pretty big range as far as like the content that they can create without it looking fake, without it looking unrealistic, and you can clearly see its defects, but it's still not perfect. These are what people, made, and this is what they offer on their website, but that doesn't mean what you make is going to be perfect either. So we can jump into my videos and show you some of the stuff that I've done just now for today's presentation. So, I'm working on a course, for example, where it's white collar crime, and it's talking about, all these like major crimes that's happened through, Bernie Madoff, the BP oil spill, and it's all financial crimes. And I wrote here as one of the prompts, Bernie Madoff standing in the finance office overlooking New York, cinematic lighting, camera tracks forward. It doesn't do a good job in like referencing actual people sometimes. Like, this is clearly not him, but the point is that it is an older gentleman, so it's somewhat accurate. But for what I wrote, this is pretty good, if I'm, again, talking about a course where I want to create a module introduction where his module is talking and saying, hey, we're going to just unpack the crimes that Bernie Madoff did, and how does one, use that sort of like research or that sort of example, that case example for their module intro. Instead of me trying to source actual footage, sometimes maybe here and there I can throw in the AI, footage. And I think that's like the goal here. It's like, it shouldn't replace everything they're using. It should like sort of supplement very subtly, because at the end of the day, it's still not real, and you can kind of tell sometimes the imperfections, and it shouldn't be that case. If you can use real footage, or if you can go out in the field and shoot it, you should, and that's the goal. Ultimately, were you going to say something?
Can you talk really quick about the prompt? So you put your topic, right, your subject,
yeah,
and you also do the environment or the location, and then the lighting and the camera movement.
Yeah, they suggest to kind of like keep it brief, but at the same time still as detailed as possible. Right. But whether it's obviously the subject or their topic, what they're doing, whether there's running, standing, drinking coffee, the location, and then obviously there's the camera and the aesthetic of your environment. Those are things that that need to be put in place. If not, it just generates what it normally thinks. And I've noticed that if I don't add cinematic lighting, it looks very like home footage or like documentary, like just shot naturally, which could be used. You're going to see in an example there. But also the camera movement, whether you want it POV or, tracking like forward or zooming back or dolly zooming back. Like, these are the terms that obviously you learn in school, in film school, and as a creative. But sometimes you can leave it blank and just you just want that scene in that location, and then you can adjust
And then by
that.
default here, is it always 5 seconds?
It is
You can
default
choose?
5 seconds. It's default 480, excuse me, because it's the fastest to generate it. But 720 is the second option, as well as the aspect ratio. And then you can change that to 1:1 or vertical 9:16. And then the other thing is version, like videos. Like I like to do 2, so I just wrote a prompt I want. I mean, I can do 4. Like it's fine, but just 1, it's like you're gonna have to wait now on a whole video to then do it again. You have 2, and then you can go based off those 2 to see which one you want to remix. You can like use this or recut or blend with something else, which is pretty neat, you know. There's also like you can add a storyboard, so you can visualize certain parts and say, hey, I wanted to change locations, or I wanted to start with this. I found this tool pretty useful, but if you're just trying to generate something and you don't know what it looks like, you probably wouldn't use this at first.
Yeah.
So this is the initial, or this is my like prompt mixed with what they use for their with their generation. So sort of mixing, this is like kind of like what mine looks the most, because it's 2 scenes. You saw it was like the gentleman looking towards the window and then a close-up of him. That's what the storyboard did. And then you can just download it, you know, right off here from Sora. Another example I just generated was George Washington crossing the Delaware River with soldiers, and then this is where I wanted to show like some of the issues that sometimes, you know, you get with AI, right? You get like this weird 2 soldiers conjoined here. There's another one where their hands are like sort of, his hands are like coming out of the oars, yeah. And he's like kind of walking, not standing on the boat. But, you know, aside from that, like when you see the water, when you see, you know, their skin, and then like their like all these like camera movements, it's pretty darn good, you know. It does a decent job at creating what I initially was wanting to do. And it's always like this. It's like you first start with an idea and you keep adding to it.
And you revise the prompt.
And you revise the prompt.
Yeah.
And then another one I wanted to show was this mission to Mars, or this Mars one with an astronaut. So this one I didn't add like the cinematic lighting, right? And you can see it here, right? Astronaut watering plant on the planet Mars, rovers and igloos for shelter in the background. You can see how it feels like it's like a home footage look, or like a documentary style look. It's not so stylized. So if you want that look, that's usually what it outputs without you specifying how you want it to be. And this is super neat, you know, because we don't have a ton of footage of people on Mars. So this would be a great example of that. You know, obviously you can then again fine tune it even more. But from what it just generated, like this is a very generic prompt. It's doing really decent job.
Yeah.
And then the last one here, this is kind of like for this course that we were talking about with Dr. Acosta, with the student in the library, sort of like, you know, reading a book, and then you have like this hologram of like a writer. I don't know if this is like William Shakespeare kind of fading in. You know, you can cut this out, like that little glitch at the end. Mm-hmm. But for what it is, again, it's useful. You know, you can then use this in your video. So that's some of the tools that you could use with Sora. You know, again, like right now we are in a good position because right now Sora is one of the leading tools. You know, Sora and like I mentioned, Google VO2. And when you look at the other ones and compare it, there are, you know, times where the video takes a little bit longer. Like I was trying out Kling, and Kling is a really cool tool. I like it, but the server's so busy, it takes 2-3 hours to generate like a 5-10 second clip. So, you know, it has its, you know, ups and downs for some of these, but so far we've had a really good time using Sora for creating content in our courses.
Yeah.
Here's like another example. Pretty simple prompt: circling around foggy and cloudy mountain peaks. Like, again, if you want to use that as asset for B-roll for your course, it's totally doable.
So we talked about generating new imagery, right? So you either find something you have in stock footage, or you're provided with something, and then whatever you can't, or you feel like there's something specific you need to create, you might try generating it. Talk about how AI now can also enhance existing assets. So maybe it's something that you were provided or you created yourself. How can AI enhance that to your use?
Yeah, that's a good question, because right now I'm working with 720 here, or I'm provided some sort of asset or photo that is low res. There's a ton of tools. Well, there's a ton, but there's only a few that I use that can enhance that. The first one being Magnific. So that Frederick Douglass example, I went and created initially the photo on Midjourney. So we can go to Midjourney and also briefly talk about that. But here you'll see I wanted, an accurate photo of Frederick Douglass, and I generated it using like a reference photo from the internet, or a painting of him. And what I chose was this one. But you see how it's still not like highly detailed or hyper realistic. It's still kind of like, it has its subtle blemishes, and it kind of looks, too like 3D-ish.
3D rendering.
Yes, as opposed to it being really real. So by downloading this photo and bringing it to Magnific, I still didn't do the highest version that we have. This is ×2. If you see right here, it goes up to times. Let's see what it goes to. ×16.
Wow.
And that's just like increasing the size as well. But with ×2, this is what I have after, and it's a way more like an insane hyper realistic of what I initially got from Midjourney. And I can use that to then go on Sora and say, hey, generate this, this video clip. And that's essentially going back to the course intro for this course, what I got from this one. I still didn't want it to be so high def, because it's still kind of like an old person. This person doesn't exist anymore. They're not alive. But I didn't want it to be too real. I wanted to kind of have that old look. So when I enhanced the video, which we'll talk after, I didn't want it to be at a 4K resolution. But when I threw it into Sora, I did ask, hey, reference this image, which is what you see over here. I asked it to reference this image, and if I had done the opposite, we would have seen a more, again, 3D version of him instead of the actual more realistic one. Another example here for a background, I'll give you this one. This was also generated in Midjourney. This is just a still image. We didn't create a video out of this, but with a still image, we can then place this in the background for a course introduction or a presentation, Miami sort of financial district looking office, right? This one up here is just like a side angle, like a 45-degree side angle, because we use 2 camera angles. So you could then use those 2 angles for your video so that it's, again, even more realistic, makes that person feel like they're in that, location, as opposed to this lower res version where it's clearly obvious that it's not it, And there's another one here that somebody else has generated for a business course, a more modern office. But these are just for images, right? Now, if I have that image or that video for Sora, I can then bring it into Topaz. So this one is not cloud-based. Everything that we've been talking so far has been cloud-based, you just log into your credentials. But with Topaz Video AI Pro, I can then insert this video and enhance it. So, we can download one real quick just to kind of show an example of what it would look like. So we'll download that. It's in my downloads. go to browse videos. And you can choose, like, there's so many presets. If you have slow motion footage and you want it even slower, you can, or if it's just regular footage and you want it slowed down, it can do that as well. It can stabilize footage. If it's shaky,
yep.
You could convert the frames per second to have like a higher, detail or sharpness, remove noise. But what I wanted to, upscale to 4K. You just click that, and then there's a ton of AI models that it comes with. I've noticed that Proteus is like the most generic and general one, but if you're using like faces, you should use Iris. So we'll go ahead and export that. It takes a couple seconds. Depends on your computer, maybe minutes. It all depends on your what you have built in.
Right.
But while that generates, the whole goal is to get a even higher res photo. And I think it's queued up. So while that's queuing up, I did want to also go down and show another thing from Magnific that's pretty interesting. Let's say you have a drawing or a photo. Let's talk about a photo actually of someone. You could use a stylizer to then say, I want it to look, claymation. I want it to look like a Simpsons character. That's what we did here. Well, this is a drawing. This one's super easy. I just drew something really simple on a piece of, like a Post-it note, and asked it to create like a claymation version of it, and that's what it did. Pretty funny. These are some of my colleagues here. Just with basic headshots, I added to say, hey, create a claymation of this individual. Shout out to Brett, wherever you're at. Also, over here we have another photo, again, just asking it to restylize to look like a Simpsons character. And this is if we had our colleague Arthur in the world of Simpsons. And then the same thing with the claymation. And it's like, okay, why are we doing this? Okay, this is cool and all, but what's the point? I think the goal here is if you want, let's say, a video of someone like me, claymation, you can then grab this image. We can then go to Runway. We can upload this image. Right now, this is just movement, right? I'm just saying, hey, add this, have him waving. But I did want to show another one where you can add a voice, and it picks up its lips, and it'll talk. Essentially, you can add a voiceover, whether you have a pre-recorded recording or the actual video. Obviously, we don't have the claymation character talking, but with this image, I can then talk over it, and it'll generate the mouth movements for it. So I find that pretty interesting in this sort of world of AI tools, because who knows, like you might want to generate an animated version of yourself, and you don't know where to begin. I mean, this is like one way to start with that.
So with Runway, obviously it's not just Runway, but there's other things that will go ahead and animate an existing image, right? So you're not just enhancing, now you're adding motion to a still.
Yeah.
It could be, like you showed, a drawing, and then all of a sudden it has motion.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the last frame on a photograph, and then AI can take it from there, and you can tell it to do something that clearly was not in the still, was not happening in the still. It's just a jumping off point, kind of like what you did here. You can further animate this to turn into something else.
Correct.
Using Runway. Okay. So yeah, that's. I don't know if we have any questions at all. One other thing we did want to talk about was audio, really quick. So you mentioned voiceover. There obviously are, you can lip sync, have a 3D object follow your mouth movement and keep the audio. But what if you don't want to record audio, right? There's what do we have here for just reading out text?
So the last thing here is PlayHT. PlayHT is another AI tool that generates voiceovers, and it has a ton of pre-recorded voiceovers, whether it's for an advertising, narrated, cinematic, or just like for what you're doing, you know, course content, you could replace your voice with an AI generated voice, you know. So this is interesting, you know, because, you know, maybe you might not, you know, you might not have a good accent, you know, it might be hard for students to understand, or you're just like, I don't want to share my voice in this video, and it's just an explainer video. It's like, let's go ahead and use the voiceover from PlayHT.
Yeah.
But one feature I actually like the most from PlayHT is that it can clone your voice. So if you upload at least 30 seconds of your voice, the more you upload, the more time, the better, because it can just clone a ton of words. It could generate your own voiceover, you know, for any sort of script that you may have. So you don't want to come in and you want like a quick little intro video on how to, you know, have students log into, let's say, a book or to download something. This AI in voiceover could then replace that video of you explaining, you telling students, hey, this is how you access that. I find that interesting, you know, because it's saving a lot of professors' time, but also it's just one of those formats where, again, it's like you want to supplement it, it shouldn't be replacing it.
Right.
Because students still want to see you. You know, students want to feel like they're in an online class and they're not just listening to an audio version of you. But yeah, PlayHT is something that we use a lot in our course content and other just projects. Like I've used this for also pre-visualization. So if I have a script and I just want to hear how it sounds, you know, before I even have the professor come into the studio, just throw it in onto PlayHT and just listening to it with no visuals, with no nothing. That's just that in itself is huge, you know. Or even if you're doing like a rough draft for, you know, certain clients, you before they come in, you'd be like, hey, like send me your script. We can record your, you know, that script or play your script through PlayHT and then use the assets over the top to see what it would look like. But eventually they would come in and actually do the real recording. Right. So as a form of like pre-production, this is another way to like, again, help see and visualize your whole content, your whole story coming about.
Or if you want to create a narrator for your content, right? Aside from you speaking, you can create your own narrator, and it looks like you have different voices you can pick from.
Yeah, you have so many different voices, you know, from different, you know, accents, from nationalities. You know, you can also have other languages too, outside of English. But the accent is pretty big. You know, you can go from American to Southern to Australian, you name it, like British, like everything you can, almost everything that you can imagine they have here. And it's pretty neat because, again, it's catered to what you want it to look like. But yeah, that narrator, like to add on to what you're using is another cool idea.
That's great. Well, thank you, Vini. It's been a lot of tools, and we'll be sure to share those out as well. And just a reminder, you know, please join us again in 2 weeks for our next session, which will feature Mahesh Nilakanta from the FAU library, and he'll be discussing coding with ChatGPT. And of course, you're also invited to visit the AI Playground every other Friday, where you can learn about new tools and try them out for yourself. So it's a great place to play and discuss how to implement AI into your course. Our next session will be demonstrating Leonardo AI's upscaler and new flow state image generator. Again, that's every other Friday as well. You can find these on Tech Events or the FAU Playground, fau.edu/AI/AI Playground. Thank you again, Vini. It's been a pleasure.